Thank you very much. I tried to pretend that I do understand, and speaking some Italian, some Spanish I did. So I realized you were giving a little bit of impression on my CV, and as you have noticed, I've been working in the German diplomatic service, and this is now my second NATO posting, and this is how we at NATO work. We sometimes work there in the international staff together with colleagues who have been there for a much longer time. We go back to our national service, we come back to NATO, not everybody, but some of us come back to NATO. And it's a fascinating situation to work together with people representing the 28 member states of NATO. So I don't think I have all 28 in my division, but close to that. And let me also thank, and I refer now to the Deputy Defense Minister, let me also just say that we have had a meeting of the Euro-Atlantic Partnership Council in the framework of, you could say, the policy planners and representatives from Brussels. And I think it's fair to say that this invitation by the Moldova Republic for us to come here was a very valuable initiative. First, we had good discussions, and secondly, we have learned a lot about your country and about the situation here in this country. So thank you very much for this invitation. And I also would like to especially welcome the representative of the NATO contact point embassy, the Bulgarian ambassador. We have that system of so-called NATO contact point embassies in every country with which we have an established partnership framework. So what I intend to do, and I think I would say I have until 5 p.m. if I'm not mistaken, more or less. And what I would intend to do is first to just give you a speech, but I know it's always more interesting to engage in questions and answers afterwards, so I will be prepared to do that. But first, let me perhaps set the scene a little bit by making some comments in the beginning. So what I'm going to do is to talk about our new strategic concept and actually our partnership policies, and they are an important feature of what we have decided in Lisbon and afterwards. So the Lisbon Summit and the adoption of the new strategic concept in Lisbon laid the groundwork to make the alliance more effective, more engaged, and more efficient. That's how we view it, at least. So a reinvigorated alliance which is firmly committed to collective defense and ready to take on modern challenges. The strategic concept, and I will just give you the main highlights. I will not bore you with every detail of our strategic concept, but the main headlines would be: it reconfirmed the bond between the 28 member states to defense of one another against attack. That is the famous Article 5 security guarantee which the member states of the alliance give to each other. The strategic concept also committed the alliance to prevent crisis, manage conflicts, and stabilize post-conflict situations. It also offered NATO's partners around the globe a more political engagement with the alliance. And it committed NATO to the goal of creating the conditions for a world without nuclear weapons, but reconfirmed that as long as there are nuclear weapons in the world, NATO would remain a nuclear alliance. It restated NATO's commitment to its open door policy and committed NATO to continuous reform, and that is what we are doing every day. We just have had a meeting of our defense ministers where we decided to reduce the number in our so-called NATO command structure and to reorganize something which we call NATO's agencies, but I don't think there are details which I should go into too much. So the summit and the adoption of our new strategic concept were just the first step, And the success of our decisions in Lisbon will now be measured by the implementation of the decisions which we have taken there. We have started right after Lisbon. There was a meeting of foreign ministers in April in Berlin. There was a meeting of defense ministers in Brussels just 1 week ago. And I can tell you, as somebody who was actually working in the machine room, so to say, that before the summit is after the summit. When we thought that the work would be less after the summit, we were really mistaken. So we are working very much on implementation, and there are just some tasks which I would like to highlight. Policies regarding our partnerships, the issue of cyber defense, to be ready to defend ourselves against so-called cyber attacks, and other capabilities like missile defense. In Lisbon, we not just had a meeting of the NATO Council and a NATO summit, we also had a meeting of the NATO-Russia Council. That was a very important feature of that meeting. And in our cooperation with Russia, we do a lot of things, but I think perhaps the most important decision in Lisbon was that joining, so to say, our decision to go for a missile defense system, the heads of state and government of NATO also decided, together with President Medvedev, that we would try to do that in cooperation with Russia. We're at the beginning of that process. There are a lot of questions which our Russian friends would ask. There are also a lot of misgivings they would have. And I think it all boils down to their feeling or their concern, let me put it that way, that missile defense might put into question their own strategic arsenals, and that is what they would call strategic stability. I think that's what it's boiling down to. So here on this one, we only started our work, and it will take us some time, I'm sure. So next year, we are going to have a summit and another NATO summit in the United States of America, and that will be for us the moment to see how we did in implementing our new strategic concept. What are the core tasks for the alliance which we have enshrined in that new strategic concept? And I should perhaps add that we do a new strategic concept every 10 years. So it is a major document for us. We haven't had that many, as you can imagine. So after the Washington Treaty, the Treaty of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, that's where NATO is coming from, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. So after the treaty, the strategic concept is the second most important paper. The core tasks or the main issues which we were dealing with in the strategic concept are three. First, as I indicated, the defense of our territory and populations. And in today's world, territorial defense also means countering so-called emerging security threats, the new threats, as some call it, which is terrorism. I mentioned already cyber attacks. There's also the issue of the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction. And for all of this, we need new capabilities, or the right capabilities. So for NATO's territorial defense to remain effective, affordable, and credible at the same time, NATO must and will push ahead with transformation in order to have more flexible, mobile, and deployable armed forces and new capabilities. The current financial situation is not something which we at NATO can disregard. It also has hit defense expenditure hard, and there's a need also in NATO for creative thinking. So we at NATO call our new approach smart defense, and that builds on an incentive provided by doing more joint capability development and promoting common or multinational approaches, and at the same time streamlining and improving defense planning. And I can say in those defense planning processes, NATO has quite some history and experience, which we also share with our partners. So, as our NATO Secretary General says, we will be cutting fat and building muscle. That's, so to say, the mantra of the debate. Crisis management will remain the second most important task for NATO, and this inter alia is being shown by our commitment to Afghanistan. You know that we had also a meeting of the ISAF coalition in Lisbon, and there we decided, A, that we would go into what we call transition, but we also signed an enduring partnership document which will make sure that our partnership develops well beyond the ongoing operation in Afghanistan, and our transition process, and that's the other important part of that decision, will remain conditions-based and not calendar-driven, but there is a goalpost, and the goalpost is to make sure that the Afghan security forces will be the first ones in charge of security, of their own security, by 2014. After Lisbon, and I admit none of us had this on our radar screens in a literal sense, we have taken up a new mission in Libya, was a mandate of the UN Security Council, and with support of the regional countries. There was a resolution by the Arab League calling for a no-fly zone. So NATO, with some partners, also from the region, we have 4 Arab countries participating, is working to support the UN Security Council Resolution 1973 on Libya by enforcing a no-fly zone, an arms embargo, and protecting the civilian population, which also then means trying to degrade the military capacity of the regime forces to threaten the civilian population. And in our meeting of defense ministers just last week, these defense ministers endorsed the decision to actually extend the operation for another 90 days from the end of June. Otherwise, end of June, the operation would have come to a halt, but we decided to extend that. The third core task is actually what we call our partnerships. And we call it in the strategic concept cooperative security, but what it is basically is partnerships. So in Lisbon, we decided that the new partnership policy should be prepared by the time of the ministerial meeting in Berlin, and we call it then the Berlin Package of Partnership Reform. This package basically had 3 elements, and they were all agreed in Berlin. One is a more efficient, the general paper, a more efficient and flexible partnership framework, which means that in the future we will work on the basis of our existing partnership frameworks, which includes the EAPC, the North Atlantics Partnership Council, which was meeting here in Chisinau just during the last days. But beyond that, also would be able to work based on themes, based on issues, in more flexible formats. The second element was a partnership toolbox document, and this actually means nothing else than to make sure that all the partners in theory have the same access to all the activities which are being offered by NATO and its partners as so-called partnership activities. In the past, there were strict lines. There was the EAPC, the Mediterranean Dialogue, and our cooperation with the Gulf countries. So we decided to put those borderlines away. There's one single menu of activities for all our partners. What it means is, in the beginning, we will have to do much more of an individual dialogue with our partner countries, because there's no one-size-fits-all. Some partners have huge ambitions when it comes to their cooperation with NATO. Other partner countries may be more distant, they want some kind of cooperation, but on the other hand, politically, it may suit them to be seen to be somewhat at a distance from NATO. Yet again, we have other partners with whom we are engaged in operations. Take, for example, a country like Australia, a partner country, very much engaged with us in Afghanistan. They participate in ISAF with 1,000 soldiers. So you see, the kind of engagement partners may show and the interest they may have can be very different.